Well, David Cohn sees Mississippi State winning just 2 games. Yahoo has Jeff Lebby on the hot seat, and one national ranking puts the Bulldogs second to last in the SEC. The national disrespect has to stop.
You are Locked On Mississippi State, your daily podcast on the Mississippi State Bulldogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Mississippi State podcast. I'm your host, Jaron Spor. Today's episode, real quick, is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. For today's show, we've got a packed show for you today because every day the national perception of Mississippi State is becoming impossible to ignore because the Bulldogs just got hit from 3 different directions. First off, David Cohn of On3 is predicting Mississippi State to go 2-10 this season. Yahoo Sports is putting Jeff Lebby on the hot seat, and The Athletic has Mississippi State ranked number 68 nationally, second to last in the SEC, ahead of only Arkansas. So apparently the message from the national media is pretty clear. They don't believe in Mississippi State. They don't believe the improvements from last season are enough. They see the schedule, they see the turnover, and they see a program that still has a lot to prove. But here's the thing. A 2-win prediction is an entirely different level of disrespect. Because that's not saying Mississippi State will struggle. That's saying Mississippi State is going to be one of the worst teams in college football. So today we're starting with David Cohn's 2-10 prediction, why I think that prediction is absolutely worth pushing back against. Then we're getting into Yahoo Sports putting Jeff Lebby on the hot seat. Is that fair, or are the expectations around this program starting to ignore just how much progress really Mississippi State has made last season? And finally, we're looking at the Athletic ranking Mississippi State number 68 nationally and second to last in the SEC. 3 national opinions, 1 clear message. Mississippi State has a lot to prove. Let's get into it because I don't know if we would want it any other way if I'm being honest. But anyways, let's just dive into this by now. Okay, so let's start with the biggest headline. David Cohn of On3 predicting Mississippi State to finish 2-10. You heard me right. 2 wins. That's the prediction. 2 wins. Now, he didn't say what wins those would be, but safe to assume that's probably ULM and that's probably Tennessee Tech, and they lose every other game. But I want to be clear. I'm not saying Mississippi State is guaranteed to have a winning season. Y'all have heard me talk about this. I'm not saying there aren't legitimate concerns about this football team. There are. The schedule's one of them. It is very difficult. Very difficult. The offense has a lot of new pieces. There are questions about the offensive line. There are questions about depth. There are questions about whether a young quarterback can take the next step. Those concerns are real. But 2-10? Come on. That's where I think this prediction becomes difficult to understand. Because a 2-10 prediction isn't just pessimistic. It's a statement about what you believe this football team is. Because if Mississippi State only wins 2 games, you're essentially saying the Bulldogs are barely better than where they were at the beginning of the Jeff Lebby era. And I just don't think that's where this roster is. Mississippi State won 5 games last season, and we've talked many times, should have won 7 or 8. More importantly, they were competitive. Like I said, in those games, they ultimately lost. There was only very few that they just got blown out in. The Bulldogs had opportunities against Texas. They had opportunities against Florida. They had opportunities against Tennessee. They didn't finish. That's a major problem, and that's a fair thing to bring up. They got to finish those games. But there's a big difference between saying Mississippi State has to learn how to finish games and saying Mississippi State is going to lose 10 games. Because if you believe Mississippi State is a 2-win team, you're saying last season's progress meant absolutely nothing. This isn't the same team Jeff Lebby inherited. The roster is deeper. The quarterback situation is different. There are more experienced players throughout the roster. And Mississippi State has added talent through the transfer portal. They obviously have talent already on the roster. The biggest name for that is, of course, Kamario Taylor. The national conversation acknowledges him. People are excited about him. The Athletic specifically called him a strong building block, which we'll get to what they said later on. Yahoo Sports called him a source of hope for the staff and fan base. Again, we'll get to what they said later on. So if the quarterback is a legitimate building block, how does that translate into only 2 wins? How? Because Taylor doesn't have to become the best quarterback in the SEC overnight. But his presence changes the ceiling of this offense. He gives Mississippi State a dynamic element at quarterback. He can create, he can extend plays, and if his development as a passer continues, the offense has a chance to be significantly more dangerous. That's the part of the 2-10 prediction I struggle with. You're acknowledging that there's an exciting quarterback. You're acknowledging that Mississippi State was competitive in several games last season, but you're projecting the same number of wins as a complete collapse from 2 years ago? Now, let's be fair. The schedule's brutal. Mississippi State goes to Minnesota, then to South Carolina. Bulldogs have Missouri to close September. October, they go at Alabama at home, at LSU, Oklahoma at home, at Texas. I mean, that is this monster stretch. Nobody's pretending otherwise. But the schedule being difficult doesn't automatically mean Mississippi State wins 2 games. Those are different things. This is the conversation we need to have, though. Where do the wins come from? Because Mississippi State opens against ULM. There are opportunities elsewhere on the schedule. Obviously, Tennessee Tech as well. Auburn, Vanderbilt. I mentioned the non-conference slate. You got Minnesota in that as well. Other SEC games where Mississippi State will have an opportunity to compete, like Missouri, South Carolina. Like, you don't have to predict Mississippi State to beat Alabama, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas to believe they can win more than 2 games. My biggest problem isn't that somebody picked against Mississippi State. That's fine. Predictions are predictions. People, you're right. You have a right to your opinion. My problem is that 2-10 feels like it ignores the context of last season and almost tells me you have no idea what this team is this year. Mississippi State was not a team that looked completely hopeless. The Bulldogs were a team that just couldn't finish. That's different. There's a difference in that. Because there's an important distinction. If Mississippi State fixes even part of that problem, not saying they go all the way, the win total changes quickly. 2 wins is possible. Any bad season is possible in college football. You have an injury here and there, like, yeah, of course. But based on what we saw last season and what Mississippi State has added to this roster, I think 2-10 is far too low. The Bulldogs have legitimate concerns, but they also have more talent, more depth, and a quarterback who could change the entire trajectory of the program. Not just this season, the program. So, Everydayers, is 2-10 the worst prediction you've seen for Mississippi State, or is there a legitimate case for it? I don't think there's a legitimate case you can make. But we're about to get into this topic. If that does come true, and they go 2-10, you want to talk about hot seat. I don't think he's on the hot seat at that point. I think he's without a seat. Like, I think he's gone if that happens. If Jeff Lebby goes 2-10. I don't see it happening. Again, I'll make my final prediction next Friday on that show. I don't see it happening, but if it did, yeah, it would not be good for Jeff Lebby. I'll just say that. Coming up, a 2-win prediction is one thing, but now Jeff Lebby is being listed among the coaches on the hot seat, and that's where this conversation gets really interesting. Well, there are more live events than ever we're seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. That's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive saving opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the usual hassle. I've talked about this many times. I have 2 big pet peeves when it comes to buying tickets. You buy a ticket, you find a ticket that you like, it's a great price, you're like, all right, let's go for it. You get to check out and it's double the price that you thought it was going to be. I don't like that. The other thing I don't like is, especially when I'm going to an arena that I don't know. If it's an arena I know, it's different, but if it's an arena I don't know, I want to know what my seats look like. Game Time takes all that guesswork out. Okay, you know how much you're going to pay. You know where your seat is. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, so Yahoo Sports is putting Jeff Lebby on the hot seat, and here's the argument. Lebby had a 2-win season his first year, which David Cohn says is going to happen again. But his first year. Followed up with a 5-win year 2. Yahoo points out that the Bulldogs blew second-half leads against Texas, Florida, Tennessee. We talked about that. But the question is whether Mississippi State can finally secure its first winning season since the Mike Leach era. Then comes the concern. Kamario Taylor gives the program hope, but the schedule is brutal. Again, we've talked about this. That's the case. But I think we need to have a serious conversation about what being on the hot seat actually means. Because Jeff Lebby won 2 games in year 1. It was a disaster. The program was in disarray. The roster was in disarray. Like, there was so much going against him. Then he went to 5 games in year 2. That's progress. Now, is 5 wins enough? No, I'm not saying that. Nobody's arguing that. But the program wasn't supposed to magically become a championship contender overnight. You didn't expect them to go 2-10 year 1 and then jump to a 9-win team in year 2. If you did, that's ridiculous. Lebby inherited a difficult situation, and year 2 showed improvement. But here's where the hot seat conversation gets complicated. Mississippi State might have been closer to 7 wins than 5 last year. Again, missed opportunities. I always bring up Texas, Florida, Tennessee. Those are the ones. Those games matter. And I bring up those because Mississippi State, it's not one of those like, oh, it could have went. No, you got to close those. You had a 7-point lead, 2 minutes left against Tennessee, you got to close that. 17-point lead in the 4th, got to close that against Texas. Florida, you're in field goal range. Don't turn it over and you probably win that game. But those games matter because they demonstrate exactly why this season is so important. Mississippi State has to learn how to close. The Bulldogs can't keep playing competitive football for 3 quarters and then falling apart late. At some point, improvement has to become victories. That's the expectations, and that's fair. Now, year 3 is when expectations begin to change. You have your quarterback, you have more of your own players, you have more depth, you have had time to establish your culture. Now, people want results. That's what makes this season important for Lebby. Not because I think he's coaching for his job every Saturday, but because year 3 is when the program needs to show that it's moving towards something. But here's the problem. Yahoo is absolutely right about one thing. The schedule's difficult. We talked about it in the first segment. Minnesota, South Carolina, Alabama, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, Ole Miss. That's a serious schedule. Not to mention Auburn, Vanderbilt. I didn't even mention Missouri. So what does success actually look like? That's the question. Because if Mississippi State goes 6-6 against that schedule, I think most people would see that as real progress. I really do. Now, if they go 7-5, I think that's a breakthrough. But if you're measuring Lebby's season only by whether he reaches some arbitrary win total, you're ignoring the context. And that's why you always have to have context when you go into these things. Okay? Context matters. Okay? The real expectations for them is he needs to show the program is moving forward. Are the Bulldogs better? Are they more competitive? Do they close games? Does Kamario Taylor develop? Does the defense improve? Does Mississippi State look like a team that is building toward consistent success? That's what I want to see. I think this is another example of how national media looks at Mississippi State. I really do. They see the record, they see the schedule, and they make a quick judgment. But if you're watching this team every week and following along what they're doing in the offseason, the picture is more complicated. The program has improved. Jeff Lebby said it's the best team he's ever had at Mississippi State. Now the next step is proving that improvement matters in the standings. Now, I don't think Jeff Lebby should be viewed as a coach whose job depends on winning 8 or 9 games. I saw someone message and said, yeah, I think if someone messaged the channel and was like, If he don't win 9 games, I think he's gone. I disagree with that. I disagree with that. And that's why I said context matters. You also got to remember, athletic departments, they're not emotional fans. They don't make emotional decisions. Well, Jeff Lebby's NIL, when Jeff Lebby's buyout isn't, even though it's not high, they don't want to pay that. And we mentioned how Mississippi State is towards the bottom in the SEC in terms of NIL spending. They're still over $20 million, which is more than several programs. So it's not like it's terrible. But that just shows, like, they don't want to then spend money on firing Jeff Lebby. Like, they don't want to do that. So that's why I said context matters. Like, if I told you black and white, hey, Jeff Lebby went 6-6. I don't tell you who he lost to. I don't tell you anything about it. You're probably like, yeah, I don't feel very great about that season. But what if I told you he went 6-6 and his losses were to LSU, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, Ole Miss? All 5 made the college football playoff. Let's say 4 out of the 5 made the college football playoff. The other one was a loss to South Carolina, and South Carolina ended up being the surprise of the SEC and narrowly missed the college football playoff. On top of that, you lost all 6 games by 14 or less points, and you were in every one of them in the fourth quarter. Does your perception change? Mine would. My perception would change. I wouldn't be as upset if I knew all those details. That's why I say context matters. You can't just go into this and just say, well, he has to get to 8 wins, and then all this stuff happens. Let's say like all the like terrible injuries happen, and they still somehow win 6 games, and you're like, well, I said they had to win 8. So I'm not in, I'm not in with him. I think they need to fire him. Like, no, you have to let context. You have to understand the context of the season. You can't look at stuff black and white. That's why you can't. I will not set a number on, and I agreed with Brooks Austin where I'm not going to set a number on what he needs to get to because again, context matters. Now, if everything's fine and dandy and everything, I think probably 6 or 7, and he's feeling good. That's not me putting a number on it and saying that he will keep his job, because I think there's a possibility he keeps his job with 5 wins. Now, below that, it gets a little shaky. That's where context would have to come in. Like, did they end up winning 4 games and it was because they had a major injury? Well, that's context you would need, is what I'm saying. So anyways, I want to hear from you. When does Jeff Lebby what does he have to accomplish this season for you to feel good about the direction of Mississippi State football? I'd love to hear it. All right, coming up, David Cohn says 2 wins. Yahoo says Jeff Lebby is on the hot seat. Now the Athletic has Mississippi State ranked number 68 in the country, second to last in the SEC. Oh yeah, we got to talk about that. All right, well, thanks for being Locked On Mississippi State. Your first listen every single day, part of Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. All right, so the third national opinion comes from The Athletic. They ranked every single FBS team, and Mississippi State is ranked number 68 nationally. And when you look inside the SEC, the Bulldogs are second to last. Only Arkansas is ranked lower. The explanation is straightforward. Kamario Taylor is a strong building block, but most of the rest of the offense will be new, and the schedule is difficult. Again, common theme with all 3 national opinions about the schedule. And honestly, I understand that logic more than the 2-10 prediction, because this ranking identifies the biggest concern with Mississippi State. A lot of new on the offense, especially the offensive line. Now, they agree with a lot of things we've said. The Athletic sees what everyone else sees. Kamario Taylor is the player people are watching. He's the quarterback. He's the potential star. He's the player who can change the ceiling of the offense, and that's a positive. But the concern is what comes around him. How quickly do the new pieces come together? Can the offensive line become cohesive? They have not been last 2 years. Can the receivers outside of Anthony Evans develop chemistry with Taylor? Can the running game outside of Taylor and Fluff Bothwell give him help? That's the concern. That's legitimate. Because this ranking isn't really questioning Kamario Taylor. It's questioning everything around him. And those are fair concerns. This is where we go back to the offensive line. Mississippi State needs this group to come together. Taylor can be as talented as everybody believes, but if he's constantly under pressure, well, the offense becomes much harder to operate. The line doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be reliable. As for the receivers, there are new pieces. There are players who need to emerge. You got Marquise Johnson, you got Zion Reagans, who people think will be able to compete for some playing time. You hope San Francisco McGee takes a step forward. Aiden Williams is back. There are players who need to emerge. There are roles that needs to be established. And chemistry matters. This is where fall camp and the early part of the season becomes critical, and actually all the way back to the spring ball. How quickly can this offense find its identity? Now, second to last in the SEC sounds terrible, and let's be honest, nobody in Starkville wants to hear it. But the SEC is also incredibly difficult. Being number 15 in the SEC doesn't necessarily mean you're 15 in talent. It means you're being compared against the deepest collection of programs in college football. Still, I'm not making an excuse for that. Mississippi State has to prove the ranking wrong, and that's the challenge. The one thing I will say about these rankings that I consistently see, what has happened with Kentucky? I am high on Will Stein too, but why does everyone just assume Will Stein is turning Kentucky around in this first year? Same with Auburn and Alex Golesh. We just assume they're getting turned around. And same with, again, there might not be anyone higher on John Summerall at Florida. But again, we're assuming they're just turning around. These were terrible football teams last year also. And all of them, they're just getting talked about like, I heard someone the other day, well, if things go right, Florida could be a college football playoff team. Like, what? What are we talking about here? Someone else said, I think it was even Paul Feinbaum, was like, Auburn could be the next Indiana. What? No. They're terrible. Like, maybe they're better than last year, but ain't much better. And then Kentucky, again, I'm high on Will Stein, but it's one of those things like, it's going to be a few years before Will Stein starts, or Kentucky starts reaping the rewards of having Will Stein. It's not something that they're going to start doing now. But they just automatically got boosted up for some reason way above Mississippi State. I don't get it. And some of the rankings, I've seen Arkansas get that, and I think that's ridiculous. Like, Arkansas was horrible last year. But what does number 68 really say? It says national expectations are low. That's the biggest takeaway. Nobody's expecting Mississippi State to shock the country. Nobody's expecting the Bulldogs to run through this schedule. The national perception is that this is still a rebuilding program. And maybe that's exactly the position Mississippi State wants. Low expectations create opportunity. If Mississippi State wins 6 or 7 games, well, the Bulldogs are going to destroy this ranking. If Kamario Taylor becomes a star, people are going to look back at number 68 and laugh. But that's why you play the game. Number 68, second to last in the SEC, a 2-win prediction, a head coach on the hot seat. That is the national perception of Mississippi State right now, folks. And the Bulldogs have 3 months to change it. But I want to hear from you. Where would you rank Mississippi State nationally right now? And are the Bulldogs really the second worst team in the SEC? I'd probably have them around 48. And I'd put them probably 12th in the SEC. That's me. The national media has made its position clear, though. Again, David Cohn sees 2 wins. Yahoo Sports sees Jeff Lebby on the hot seat. The Athletic sees Mississippi State's at number 68 nationally and second to last in the SEC. And that's the perception. But here's what I want to know. Mississippi State doesn't have to be perfect to prove these predictions wrong. The Bulldogs simply have to take the next step. Win the games they should, compete against the teams everyone thinks they can't beat, and most importantly, finish. Because if Mississippi State can finally finish close football games, this team has a chance to make a lot of national predictions look very, very foolish. Very foolish. Because the predictions are in, the rankings are out, and nobody believes in Mississippi State. Now it's up to the Bulldogs to change that conversation. All right, that's going to do it for the Locked On Mississippi State podcast. Tomorrow we got a lot more football to talk about. We're just a little bit over a week away from the season starting. It's crazy. It's going to be here before you know it, and I can't wait. I'm ready to watch games this weekend. I told my wife, we've had so much stuff with people wanting to come see the baby and stuff, and I'm like, hey, can we just not do anything on Saturday? Because I kind of just want to watch football all day. And it's not even any great games I want to watch. Like, I'm probably going to watch TCU North Carolina and watch TCU blow the doors off North Carolina. I don't care. I want to watch football. I've watched more preseason action this year than I think I ever have. So I'm just excited for football season to start. But real quick, on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 YouTube channel on college sports, and on audio, check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin for your second listen. For Locked On Mississippi State, I'm Jaron, and until next time, Hail State.